This is Dayton Mayor Ann Whaley, and you are listening to Carry As You Climb, the podcast that shares the stories of amazing women leaders. Today, we have a very special Mother's Day podcast with my mom, Ann Whaley, down in Cincinnati, Ohio. Well, I am really excited for this special Mother's Day Carry As You Climb podcast because today I am in my mom's kitchen interviewing my favorite woman, my mother, Ann Whaley. How are you, Mama?
I'm good, Nanny. How are you?
I'm good. Now, Steve, you already know something special about my mom, that she calls me Nanny. So it's great. It's great. That's how it's supposed to go, Mama. So I thought for Mother's Day that we would have a conversation with my mom, who I like to talk a lot about. I think she ends up in like nearly every speech I give. So you can tell she has a great impact on me, and talk about like how her story of her life, which has been pretty special, and talk about mentorship too. So I know most of these stories, Mom, but I'm going to ask questions that for the listeners. So why don't you tell everybody your political story of what you've done in politics?
Well, I was kind of born into politics because your grandfather and grandmother were involved in politics. So at a very young age, I learned how to register voters and as soon as I could drive, I drove voters to the polls because that was how you did it. And I didn't know any different. So when I moved to Mooresville, where we live,
right?
When I moved there, it was really interesting that it was a community it was a one-party community, and very seldom.
And not our party.
And
right.
not our party. And I came from an area that was the other way.
Right.
So what happened was a city election was coming up, and no one was running for, we didn't have a mayor, we just had a clerk treasurer, and no one was running against the incumbent clerk treasurer. And I just feel that our system works best when it's a two-party system. And when people have a choice on who to vote for, that's when our system works best. So your dad and I decided it would be a good idea just to try it out. Probably would not win, because it is a 70% other party,
Republican
right. Party city, which is not really a city, it's a town, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But I won.
By how many votes?
63.
63 votes. Yeah, I remember because I was like in 6th grade when this happened. It was a very big deal. David and my brother and I got to wear our Whaley shirts to school, but only on Election Day. You never let us wear it beforehand because you didn't want it to be too political. I remember that. But it was a very big deal for us to get to wear them on Election Day.
Election Day, exactly. And I remember David, and probably you also, you're a little older, so yeah. You didn't have to check in as often as David did. But I remember David and his friends on Election Day riding their bikes with my poster on the front of their bikes.
Oh, that's so cool.
It was really exciting.
And Aunt Nan made the signs, right?
Yes, she did. Yes, your aunt did. She did all the artwork on the signs.
They were whales, of course, right?
They were.
Right. They were very cute, yeah.
And we used the school colors as our colors. And, and I was right. The country works better and the system works better in a two-party system.
So what was that like being, the only Democrat in basically the county in an elected position? What did you walk into when that happened?
It was very interesting. I always felt like that I had 2 terms in office, and during my terms, I always felt like that the town of Mooresville had excellent representation because I had to be just a little better than anybody else because they were all watching, right? They being the Republican Party. But it turned out really, really good because my best friends in the world turned out to be people on the commission.
Right.
And they weren't of the same party. They were Republicans. And I really found out during that time that, Republicans every once in a while have good ideas too.
Shocking. So, and during this time, you also ran for statewide office, right?
I ran in 1988. I ran for
1990.
1990.
Yeah.
1988, I ran for clerk treasurer the first time. In 1990, I ran for auditor of the state of Indiana. That was also a humbling experience.
Yeah.
I got the baseline vote. It was very difficult to raise money. The advantage I did have was I was the only woman on the ticket, and the governor was a Democrat, was Evan Bayh. And that was the advantage I had. It didn't turn out to be an advantage enough to win,
right?
But it was an educational experience, and I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to do that.
What'd you learn?
How very expensive it is, and how to run for statewide office, and no matter what state it is. I know that in Ohio is physically bigger than Indiana, but it's still very expensive in Indiana to run. And that when you're a candidate, a statewide candidate, most of your time is spent raising money. That the people don't really care what you have to say as long as you can raise money to get your name out there. That was probably the number one thing I learned running for statewide office. Also, that politics, it's all local.
Yeah.
That no matter what town or city you go into, you better have a good idea of what's going on in that town or city, or you're not going to get their support.
Right. And, 92 counties in Indiana, even though we have 88 in Ohio, they're smaller, but 92 counties, right? In Indiana.
Right. 92 counties in Indiana. We went to every county, some of them many more times.
Right. There's more important counties than
Right.
others. Right. Right. So the money aspect of it, did you learn, I remember, I was in 8th and 9th grade during this period when you're running. Did you, how did you get comfortable speaking? Were you just automatically comfortable? I just remember doing a lot of dinners during this time.
You mean public speaking?
Yes.
I was not a good public speaker.
No?
Initially, no. I talked too fast, number one.
Yeah.
And initially I thought people knew who I was, and they didn't. And I had to realize that they didn't know who I was. And so I had to introduce myself at each speech. I became more comfortable. It's just like everything else you do. The more you do it, the better you become.
Right.
And public life, if you're not a good public speaker, you probably should get out. Because that's how you communicate with the electorate.
Right. Now, I was going to ask too, during this time, so you had 2 kids, right? In 7th and 9th grade. How did you balance it? You're the only woman running for statewide office, really a trailblazer. What was that like?
Well, your dad was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Your dad worked at General Motors. He was, as you know, Daddy was a union official, and he got off work at 3:00, and that was the same. By the time he got back to Mooresville, because the plant was in Indianapolis, and we lived 20 minutes away, and he would pick you up from school, or he would be at home when you got home. And he was really phenomenal. Now, I do understand that probably you ate out every night because he is not a very good cook.
Right.
But if it hadn't been for the support, your dad's support, we could never have done it. Then on the weekends, as I'm sure you remember, we all traveled together.
Right.
The family went to every side of Indiana together. And I would imagine that's probably where you developed a taste for politics, when that's all you did in your spare time was follow your mom around the state of Indiana.
It was exciting. I remember that summer. It was really fun, and getting to go to all these small towns across Indiana. I did enjoy it. And I think it's something David, my brother, remembers a lot too. So then you did your 2 terms and then decided to get out of elected office, right?
I did. My second term I ran unopposed. It was the first time a Democrat ever ran unopposed for any office in Morgan County, which is where Mooresville is in Morgan County. Which that was pretty phenomenal. And then during that term, the town of Mooresville, we changed the town a lot. The town expanded, and I had goals, and I reached all the goals, and Daddy and I just decided, it was time, and this is really mercenary, but it was a time when you were getting ready to go to college.
I was in college. Yeah, I was in college.
And David
was getting ready to go.
Your brother was getting ready to go to college, and we needed more money.
Right.
And so I had to go to work in the private sector.
Right. So if you're like a young woman running for office or thinking about running for office in a small town or any community, what's your advice for them?
I mean, you need to know the office you're running for. That I think a lot of people make a mistake. They run for an office and they don't know what it entails. You really, especially in a smaller community, you really need to know what that job is. And then after you know what the job is, you really have to want it. That has to be, aside from everything else, your number one goal has to be, I want to do this job. I want to serve the people of this community. And I think if you know the job and you really want to do that job to serve the people, you'll get elected and you'll really have a great life.
That's true. I think that's true too. That's great advice. Talk to me, Mom, about folks that you stood on, women or men that helped you through this process. Your mentors during this time.
Well, when I was young, prior to meeting your dad, prior to moving to Morrisville, I worked in the county auditor's office in Dearborn County, Indiana.
Which is Lawrenceburg, Indiana, right?
Which is my home. And the county auditor was Betty Bischoff, woman.
Right.
Young woman.
Unheard of, really.
Really. Her father had been the county auditor. Mm-hmm. And Betty was a great mentor. There were two girls. We only had 3 employees in the whole office besides the auditor.
So total of 4 people.
Total of 4 people in the county auditor's office. The county auditor, the first deputy, who is my best friend, and myself, and then we had a bookkeeper. That was the total office. And Betty she was great at promoting us, not in the office, but to the public, and she taught us how the auditor's office works, which, in every county, and I think this is, and even true in Ohio, in every county, the auditor's office plays a substantial role in government. And Betty taught me how important those roles are and what effect we have on the public when you are in one of those offices. And it was just the amount of knowledge I could never have gotten anywhere else.
So when you ran for state auditor, was Betty excited?
Yes, she was. Yes, she was very instrumental in me running. She was very instrumental in during the campaign. She was very sad when we lost.
Oh, yeah.
But yet she was very instrumental in it. And matter of fact, it wasn't too long ago that I saw Betty again. We're all retired now, but we talked some about when we were all in the auditor's office and what it was like because that office was very young.
Yeah. So, how much older is Betty from you?
4 years.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
She was 22 years old.
She was 22 years old, elected to county auditor in Dearborn County.
Yes.
Oh, wow. And then you were all just like young women in this office.
Yes.
Oh, I bet you made all the county electeds talk.
Yes.
Yes. I bet so. That's great.
It was. Betty had Betty's first deputy's name was Jackie Stutz, and Jackie's grandfather had been the county auditor prior to Betty's father. So between Jackie and Betty, there was a huge amount of knowledge regarding the auditor's office and the governing of that office. So because we were so young, they had to be really good because there were all these guys that looked at us like, who do you all think you are?
Mm-hmm. So what do you think now, Mom, like looking at like so many women in politics, so many women running for president, woman running for president, 4 years ago with Hillary Clinton or 3 years ago. What's your thought process in seeing this happen from like when you came and only Betty and then you being the only woman on the ticket?
Well, I think it took a long time.
Yeah.
Thank goodness it's finally happened.
Right.
And I think that the public finally realizes that, it does not, your gender doesn't matter when you're running for public office. Your knowledge is what matters. And, if you're, no matter your gender, if you're the best person for that job, you should get elected. And if you portray that to the electorate, it usually works. Not always.
Right. Right.
Usually.
And who's one of your favorite elected leaders right now? That like in the national spectrum.
Oh, I was going to say the mayor.
Yeah, I know. That's what.
Nationally?
Yeah, nationally. I wanted to. Nationally.
Nationally. Oh, I don't. I like Congressman Harris.
Senator Harris.
Senator
Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like her a lot. I think she is the epitome of young woman in politics.
Yeah.
Elected, serving. I think she serves her constituency well. And then I will always like Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah. You're all California here.
Well, it was pretty. I was just going to say, Nanny, it was pretty interesting that years ago, and I can't tell you the years, when Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein were the senators from California, I was ready to move there.
Because both women.
Yes.
Both amazing. Boxer was amazing too. Yeah.
They both were excellent public employees and public servants. Excellent. So
That's great. I didn't know that, Mom. That's something I learned from you today. Okay, now when we close out the podcast, we always ask 2 questions. And for the listeners, my mother is the most avid listener to the podcast. She texts me as soon as it launches, so she knows the questions already. So I'll start. And also, as my mom mentioned, we're from Indiana, so she just recently moved to Ohio about 6 years ago and lives not in Dayton, unfortunately, but in the Cincinnati area, which is still great because my brother's down here. So she doesn't like to, right, Mom? You don't like to be called a Buckeye, right?
No, I'm a Hoosier.
She's always a Hoosier. So when you think of Ohio, what do you think of?
Cincinnati Reds.
Oh, Reds. Oh, yes.
And my 2 children.
Oh,
and my 2 grandchildren.
That's
what Ohio is to me.
Oh, well, it's not bad then.
No.
The Buckeyes are warming up to you if that's your family.
I've been a Reds fan my whole life.
Right.
So when I moved back, that was the first thing we did, start going to Reds games again. So when I think of Ohio, I really think of Cincinnati. I really think of the Reds. When I think of Ohio, I think of Cincinnati and now Dayton, because both of my children went to the University of Dayton. So I kind of got a little warmed up to it during that time. And obviously now, since you're the mayor, I still think of it. But I can't think of Ohio without thinking of you and David and Teddy and Abby.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. We're glad for that. And then my last question is, if there's a woman leader of any time, during any period of time, who is your favorite?
Eleanor Roosevelt.
And why?
Well, there was no woman ever in her time more forward-thinking, more... she epitomizes what a first lady should be. Prior to her being the first lady was really just kind of like the hostess of the White House. I mean, they gave teas and went to luncheons. They were not ever involved in policy. I don't think they ever were ever allowed to even say what they thought. Eleanor Roosevelt changed all of that. I feel she made it possible for Hillary Clinton to run for president.
Wow. And did you remember seeing Eleanor Roosevelt like on TV or?
Oh, most definitely. President Kennedy appointed her. I think she was the delegate to the UN. And she was such a forebearer in civil rights, and she was on TV often. She also, I don't know, most people probably don't even remember this, but she also wrote a weekly newspaper article.
Oh, yeah?
Editorial op-ed, which was carried like in every newspaper. I mean, even the Cincinnati Enquirer carried it because I read it when I was a little girl. And every week, I believe it was weekly. You didn't have to check that to be sure, but she would have some subject matter that I always felt like she was talking to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you remember any of them particularly?
Well, I remember one, the civil rights one, when it was really the civil rights and women's rights together. She was excellent at framing that together. And I remember her saying that women are a lot like tea bags. You never know how strong they are until you put them in hot water. Right. And I always thought that was just really cool.
That's a great statement. I didn't know she's the one that said that.
She is.
It's true. It's true. That's really true.
That's really true. So she's to me
the best ever.
Oh yeah, she just epitomizes the women's movement.
That's great. That's great. I didn't know that either. See, I've learned. So thank you, listeners, for letting me learn a little more about my mother. And Mom, it's just been really great to have you on this Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you. It's great being your mom.
Well, it's great being your daughter. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Carry As You Climb. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at CarryClimbPod. Also, visit our website at carryasyouklimbpod.com to sign up for our latest updates. Also, please subscribe and rate us on wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.